Imagine a war so long it lasted 10 whole years. And in the end, the winning side didn't win with swords. They won with a giant wooden horse. Sounds crazy, right? But that's how the story of the Trojan War goes. Gods playing games with people's lives. Heroes almost impossible to kill. A city nobody could break into. And one of the sneakiest tricks in any story, anywhere. We've been telling it for 3,000 years. Grab a seat. It starts, believe it or not, at a wedding. A sea goddess named Thetis was marrying a mortal king, and every god on Mount Olympus was invited. Everyone except Eris, goddess of trouble and arguments. You can probably guess why nobody wanted her at a party. Eris showed up anyway, just long enough to roll one small object into the middle of the celebration and walk away. A golden apple. And carved into it were 4 words. For the most beautiful. 3 goddesses claimed it. Hera, queen of the gods. Athena, goddess of wisdom and battle. And Aphrodite, goddess of love. They argued and argued, then took it to Zeus. He looked at his wife, his daughter, and the goddess of love and said, essentially, absolutely not. Find someone else. So the job landed on Paris, a prince of Troy living in the countryside herding sheep. One afternoon, 3 goddesses appeared and told him to pick a winner. And here's where it stops being a beauty contest. Each one offered him a bribe. Hera offered power, Athena offered wisdom and victory in battle. Aphrodite offered the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite. Big mistake because that woman, Helen, was already married to a Greek king named Menelaus. Helen wasn't just any queen. Years earlier, kings and princes from all over Greece had competed to marry her, so many that her father got nervous. He feared the losers would start a war, so he made every one of them swear an oath. Whoever Helen chooses, the rest of you defend that marriage. Forever. Remember that promise. It's about to matter. Helen chose Menelaus. And years later, Paris arrived as a guest in their home, and with a little help from Aphrodite, Helen left with him and sailed to Troy. Menelaus was furious, and he had something no ordinary husband has, a room full of kings who had all sworn an oath. Menelaus went to his brother Agamemnon, the most powerful king in Greece, and Agamemnon called in every promise. Warriors came from across the Greek world, 1,000 ships worth. People still call Helen the face that launched 1,000 ships. Not everyone was eager. Odysseus, the cleverest man in Greece, had a newborn son and no interest in a war overseas, so he faked madness plowing his fields with salt. It worked until someone set his baby in front of the plow. He stopped instantly. Trick exposed. Achilles, the greatest fighter alive, had been hidden by his mother among the daughters of a faraway king. Odysseus found him too, laying out gifts, slipping a sword among the jewelry, and watching who reached for it. And the largest army Greece had ever assembled set sail for Troy. Here's the problem. Troy was not an easy city to beat. It sat on a hill by the sea, wrapped in stone walls so massive the Trojans believed the gods had built them. No climbing over, no smashing through. So, the Greeks dragged their ships onto the beach and settled in. They fought battle after battle on the plain outside the city. They won fights, lost fights, buried friends, and got nowhere. 1 year passed. Then 5, then 9. 9 years intense on a beach, staring up at a wall you cannot get past. And Troy was still standing, completely untouched. Now, Achilles, the reason the Greeks had any chance at all. He was the son of Thetis, the goddess from that wedding, at the very beginning. When he was a baby, she tried to make him immortal by dipping him in a magical river. But she had to hold on to him, and she held him by the heel. That patch of skin never touched the water. Everywhere else he was untouchable. In battle he was less a soldier than a natural disaster with a name. But his heel could be hurt. That's where we get Achilles' heel. One small weak spot in something otherwise unbeatable. Fun fact, the heel isn't in the oldest version of the story. It was added centuries later, and it stuck. In year 9, the Greeks nearly lost the war not to the Trojans, but to an argument in their own camp. Achilles and Agamemnon fought furiously over honor and who deserved what. Agamemnon was the commander, so he pulled rank and took away a prize awarded to Achilles. Achilles was humiliated, and he did something nobody expected. He quit. He walked to his tent and refused to fight. Without him, everything fell apart. The Trojans pushed the Greeks back to the ships and started setting them on fire. The Greeks weren't just losing the war. They were about to lose any way home. And Achilles still wouldn't move. Achilles had a best friend named Patroclus, who watched the army get pushed to the edge of the sea, while his friend sat in a tent, still angry. So he asked for one thing: let me wear your armor. The idea was simple. If the Trojans saw that armor coming, they'd think Achilles was back, and panic. Achilles agreed on one condition: push them away from the ships, then come straight back. Don't go near the walls. It worked. The Trojans saw the armor and ran, and Patroclus kept going right up to the walls of Troy. Waiting there was Hector, Troy's greatest warrior and crown prince. And Hector killed him. When the news reached Achilles, his anger at Agamemnon vanished, replaced by something far worse. Achilles came back, and it was terrifying. He tore through the Trojan lines until every soldier had fled inside the gates. Every soldier except one. Hector stayed outside, alone. His father begged him from the gate to come in. His mother begged him. His wife, holding their baby son, had begged him not to go out at all. He knew what was coming. He stayed anyway, because the people inside were his. They fought outside the walls, in full view of both armies, the most famous duel in all of legend. Achilles won. Then he did something cruel. He tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it around the city, while Troy watched from above. Grief had turned him monstrous, and even the gods thought he'd gone too far. That night, an old man walked alone and unarmed out of the gates of Troy into the enemy camp. It was King Priam, Hector's father. He came to the tent of the man who killed his son, knelt down, and asked for the body back so he could bury him properly. And Achilles, the angriest man in Greece, looked at this old father and thought of his own, far away, who would never see him again either. The two of them wept together. Achilles gave the body back and paused the fighting so Troy could hold a funeral. It's the quietest scene in the story, and a lot of people think it's the best one. The war ground on, and eventually the greatest fighter in the world ran out of luck. It wasn't a duel that got him. It was an arrow shot by Paris, the same prince who started all this by picking up a golden apple. Apollo guided it, and it struck the one place he could be hurt: his heel. Paris didn't last much longer either. 10 years in, both sides had lost most of their heroes, and the Greeks were exhausted, out of ideas, and still outside that same wall. They needed something completely different. This is where Odysseus finally gets his moment, the clever one who faked madness to get out of the war in the first place. His plan was so strange it only worked because nobody would ever expect it. Stop attacking the walls, get invited in instead. The Greeks built an enormous hollow wooden horse with room for soldiers to hide inside. The horse was sacred to the Trojans, so it would look like a religious offering. Then came the second half. The Greeks burned their camp, loaded their ships, and sailed away only as far as a nearby island, where they anchored out of sight. The next morning, the Trojans looked out and saw an empty beach, a pile of ashes, and one giant wooden horse. The Trojans weren't stupid. Some took one look at that horse and said absolutely not. A priest named Laocoon warned them it was a trap. He's the one who supposedly gave us the line, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." Princess Cassandra warned them too. She had a strange curse. She could see the future perfectly, but nobody ever believed her. She told her city exactly what would happen, and they ignored her. The Greeks had also left behind a soldier named Sinon, who let himself be captured and told a convincing lie. The Greeks had given up and gone home, and the horse was a gift to the gods. After 10 years of siege, the Trojans wanted so badly for it to be over. So they knocked open their own wall and rolled the horse inside. That night, Troy celebrated. The war was over. They'd won, and eventually the city went to sleep, and a hidden door in the horse's belly swung open. The soldiers climbed down, moved through streets they'd stared at for a decade, and opened the gates from the inside. Out on the water, the Greek fleet had already turned around. Troy had held for 10 years. It fell in a single night. So that's the Trojan War. An apple nobody should have picked up, 10 years of fighting, and a victory won not by the strongest man but by the cleverest. And the story is still all around you. A hidden weakness is an Achilles' heel. A gift that isn't really a gift is a Trojan horse, which is exactly why that computer virus has that name. One last thing. For centuries, people assumed Troy was invented. Then, in the 1870s, excavations in northwestern Turkey uncovered a real city, built, destroyed, and rebuilt many times, exactly where the old stories said Troy should be. We still don't know how much of it really happened, But the city was real, and the story has outlived every